JT Crowley is talking books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley, the host of Talking Books Show on Web Talk Radio. And today I have the wonderful pleasure of talking to David Rice from Australia to talk about his book, Sailing Away. It's a small book of reflective poems written to highlight what he and some of his family members experienced in their lives. It's not just a book of poems, there are 6 poems, but it's also he's talking about his experiences and the background to what he feels is important when you are talking and dealing with somebody who's got narcissistic characteristics. So, David, clearly you know more about the book than I do because you've written it. So would you care to come and join me on the show to talk a little about yourself and to give us the background to this story? But could you just say, come and join me for the time being?
Good evening, John.
David, before we open this book, your book of your 6 poems and the background to your own experiences of handling narcissism, would you care to tell the viewers, the audience, the listeners who you are and what's the story behind this book?
I'm a civil engineer. I was born in Australia, but my family moved to New Zealand when I was 3 years old. I had 6 brothers and sisters, and my father died when I was in my early teens, about 15. What motivated me to write the book was that my mother died in May this year, and there'd been quite a traumatic time relationship with her in my life, and I don't know, I just felt quite inspired to put something in writing, and that wasn't my initial thoughts. I started off by writing a poem. Never really written a poem in my life before, and it just went from there. I believe I was spiritually motivated to write the book. It is it's a collage really of my life experience and also information that relates to that experience.
I think you summed that up very well. I just want to clear one thing up, everybody. He doesn't have 6 brothers and 6 sisters. He's one of 7. He says yes. His
Okay.
poor mom's not had 15 kids, everybody. He's one of 7.
Fair enough.
I think the best way, David, for people to understand what your book is about is for us to have a look at 3 of the 6 poems that you have written. And for that, everybody, you can then get a flavour as to his style of his poetry, but more importantly, what's the underlying message within those poems. So there are 6 poems, but we're only going to look at 3 of them. David will read 2 of them, and I'm going to read 1. So we'll go to the first poem, David, and that is The Bob. Would you care
Yes.
to read it and tell us what it's about?
The Bob. In Bolton town, a lad's keel was laid, in Lancashire on a sunny morn. Irish Catholic blood in his veins did flow, from County Wicklow, 'twas a long way to go. His da were a carpenter, skilled with his hands, and young lad followed in his plans. A scoutmaster too, he were a man of might, in Bolton town he were a familiar sight. Swimming and rambling his joys in life, among to hills and valleys free from strife. In Europe he ventured with friends in tow, through woods and hills their spirits did grow. Into Second World War he did take part, travelling to India with a brave heart. To the Taj he went, a sight to behold. In faraway lands his story we're told. To Australia he ventured, seeking new horizons. First Tasmania, then Queensland, with eyes full of visions. Eyes full of visions. There he met his love in 1049. In a caravan they lived, their hearts did entwine. A fleet home he built with love and care. In Southport they settled, a life to share. With his own business he made his mark, hard working and meticulous even in the dark. 7 ships under construction they had, a lively brood, raised in faith as he understood. But conflicts arose with his the duty's change of heart. In New Zealand they moved, a brand new start. In Tauranga Bay they made their home amidst the waves and seagulls' foam. But illness struck his head in pain, a brain tumour, a battle in vain. Through surgeries and treatments he fought with might, but the tumour returned, casting a shadow of night. In 1074 he took his last breath. In Tauranga Hospital he embraced sinking. A man of faith through trials and tears, he stood strong despite his fears. A quiet soul with a heart so pure, in Bolton town his memory will endure. I think of him often with love in me heart, a brigandine, a guide never to part. I miss you, Dad, in every way. In Bolton town forever you'll stay.
Powerful poem. What's the story behind it?
I think the motivation for it is that my father, he was ill for quite some time before he died. And from when I was about 3 years old or 4 years old, he got sick. And he was a great man. He had his Catholic faith. He wanted to bring up his children as Catholics. He met my mother and she became a Catholic, and she decided that she would do the right thing and bring up her children as Catholics, but she changed her mind. And once she was married and had a few kids, she decided that she didn't want to be Catholic, which sort of broke his heart. But further on from that, he also got sick. He got a brain tumor, and but he lived. He was told he would live for 1 year. Once they found the brain tumor, they operated, but it was malignant, and they said you'll probably last a year. But he lived for 12 years, and I believe because his will made him live to be there for us children as long as absolutely possible. But when he died, no one cried. My mother didn't cry. None of us children cried, because it was a relief to see him go, because he was in such pain when he was immobile basically when he died. And he's never been correctly memorialized. And part of this book was to memorialize him and the sadness of his life, and the fact that he got sick, the fact that he married someone he loved, and then she basically didn't. He was a devout Catholic, and she didn't continue with that. I know that's not unusual, but that must have made him very sad. And also, when he did die, he went into hospital, but none of us children saw him go. None of us were asked to go and see him or to see him before he died, and that was very sad. And I think that he was never memorialized properly. When he died, my mother basically just moved on and just met other men, and us children were just a burden on her and the rest of her life. So consequently, he didn't treat me very well. So yeah, that's what the book's about, is to memorialize him mainly, but then also to share with people what I've been through in my life and how some people can have terrible lives, even though they might live in the modern world. There are hangovers from the past which create issues, mental health issues in people, for generations recurring.
Sure. As I said, everyone, it's a very emotional poem, like all his poems are. Now, I'm going to read the next one. This one's a little shorter, and it's headed up the pier run, and I'm reading it from my phone. In 67, 5 ships sailed with pride to find new lands where they could reside. The Bob, the Johnny Boy, the Ennywigs, the Wobbojet, the Davy too. Together they ventured the ocean blue. First stop was Hahi Bay, with seafood divine, resting in calm waters, a welcome sign. Then on to pier, where waves did roar, testing their skills for battles in store. Wahi Bay came next, with waves to play, a perfect bay to rest and stay. The ships frolicked, the crew so free, while the Bob kept watch, a strong sentry. Tauranga Bay welcomed them with grace, a peaceful harbour, a perfect place. At 68 became the end of the voyage near. The crew looked back on a journey so dear. The Bob, a fighter till the end, through battles and storms it did defend. In 67 and 68 their spirits flew, a fearless crew with adventures anew. They sailed through tempest and calm, guided by stars and each other's strong arm, facing the unknown with courage and cheer. Every mile conquered, they held dear. From Piers roar to Tauranga's peace, they found in Early Bay a moment of release. The ocean their home, the ships their kin. With every surprise, sunrise, new tales would begin. I think the first thing we need to point out to the viewers, David, is that the references to like, the Bob, the Judy, and all the other, here, the Johnny Boy, the the Wobbo Jed, the Davy too. They are references to, or like little nicknames to your members of your
Mm,
family.
that's right, yeah.
And of course, this is the journey to New Zealand.
Mm,
Want to give
mm.
us the backdrop here?
Well, actually, that story there, the Piha Run, that was a holiday that my father took just the boys on to
Ah,
Piha. Yeah, yeah. That was he. We hired a caravan, and my brothers, except my youngest brother, but there was 4 boys and my father, and we went away at Christmas time and went to Piha, which is just west of Auckland, to Hai, which is on the Coromandel Peninsula, and Waihi, which is sort of at the bottom of the Coromandel Peninsula. And we lived in Tauranga, yeah. And it was just a nice time I remember, just with my brothers and my father, and my mother wasn't there. And it was a lovely time, a special time. Yeah.
yes, I've been to those places. Yes, I've been to Pia. I know where it is.
Yeah.
I've been to New Zealand twice.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful country, but the one area I didn't go to, unfortunately, was where David spent his childhood, Tauranga, in the Bay of Plenty. I went everywhere else. Don't ask me why I didn't go there. I don't know everybody, but it's a beautiful country, yes, and I know where he's talking about. Um, David, would you care to read the next poem to us?
Okay. Yeah,
The
sure.
Healing.
The healing. The Judy sunk not long ago, but I didn't mourn her, for I had a deeper woe. Made to feel sorrow and shame, always the one to blame. On the high seas she fired cannonballs at my hull, sails, and mast, her anger calls. That was her tool for law and order. In her class, no mercy to afford her. Even the sound of her whistle would make me bristle, a feeling not to miss, driving me back to dock, away from the strife. She didn't like my Jenny Wren, cursed my life. So much hate, a depth unfathomable. I couldn't bear, it was unbearable. I don't miss the ships of lions either. One of them once threatened me with a blither. She fashioned a harpoon aimed for the sky, pierced my hull with a heavy sigh, left a breach for water to sneak in. Oh, what a malicious, wretched sin. In the past, I'd stop, just drop anchor, or drift as a becalmed schooner with no anchor. With my true love, Jenny Wren by my side, sewing up the rips in my sails, a gentle guide. She took my torn and bleeding heart, bandaged it with love, a fresh start, healing me with care and devotion, bringing me back to life's ocean. Forever grateful for her being by my side, hopes and dreams now open wide. My heart now whole, my soul at peace. With my lovely Jenny Wren, life's storms do cease.
I think this is your relationship between yourself and your mother
Yeah,
after she's passed, isn't it? You're talking about this.
yeah, yeah. Mm.
And the Jenny Wren is your wife.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
When you wrote these poems, did you write them from the heart?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It really it was getting a story out there. And as I said, I believe that it was spiritually guided. I believe that my father, now that once my mother had died, he decided that he could share with me the true stories. Um, and some of it is from memory, but I think some of it, and it was all put together to make sense to me, to actually make sense of what had gone on and what had happened and how um, she had actually victimized me. Um, and I think I said in other places, I've said how I had a special relationship with my father. I think she was jealous of that relationship. And I had a special relationship, and I still have a special relationship with my wife, and she was jealous of that. And because she saw something that she couldn't experience. Um, Personally, she could not experience that connection and love for someone and devotion to someone that wasn't within her emotional vocabulary. Um, and so she was jealous, and I think she went out to torment me, which is
Yeah,
very sad. Yeah,
it's very sad. And of course, unfortunately, it is one of the characteristics of people who are of a narcissistic nature, no
yeah.
empathy,
No empathy, no.
no
Just
empathy.
jealousy. Just
Yeah,
jealousy. Yeah.
yeah. So, as I said, everybody, it's part of the book is about the six poems, but the other part is about David's experiences around narcissism and the background and his experiences. So let's have a look at this part of the book. Now, David, talk to me about why you felt it was so necessary to talk about in the book the contents of the afterwards section. What's in this section and why is it there?
Um, I think the afterwards sort of hopefully stitches together the different parts of my story and makes sense of it. Um, it's, it's done in the nautical theme. It uses words like keel being laid, which is being born. I think it's sort of written to explain that I don't blame my mother. I believe she was a damaged person. And luckily I've healed from that and come to the realization of what happened to me. And I was, for a long time in my life, I struggled with anxiety issues, performance issues, and I could never understand why. But it makes sense, the criticism, the belittlement, I do remember once as a young teenager thinking she was so vicious in her attacks, physical attacks and emotional attacks, verbal attacks. I remember thinking to myself, I hope this doesn't actually affect me in my life, and that it was a conscious thought. I hope this actually doesn't affect my life. And it did. It actually did. And I had no control over that. So, and it's
Because
taken me a long.
when you look at the book, I mean, your mother didn't have a very good childhood, did she?
No, no, no. Her father had abandoned the family when she was just born. And so she was brought up with a mother that was struggling financially with 6 other children. And so she obviously got neglected. Her mother was probably depressed, couldn't show her any love. So she couldn't pass that on, basically.
Do you think it stems from there? Her own childhood?
I believe so, but I think it was intergenerational. It's her father left. I'd say that something similar could have happened to him. His parents probably left, or his father left, or there was trauma in his childhood. And this is the basis, I believe, of a lot of broken relationships, is that these generational trauma back in the past, which doesn't allow people to connect properly or to understand others or to empathize, basically. And so they conflict and they fall apart.
Indeed, they do, unfortunately, everyone. Now,
Mm.
I found your writing under definition of a narcissistic mother poignant and very touching. You talk about a lack of empathy. We've already touched on that, everybody. Conditional love, excessive criticism, enmeshment, plus other issues and trademarks associated with narcissism. Would you care to enlighten us here? Why this section of the book is here?
Oh, basically just to, I guess, just to educate people that not all mothers are loving. Not all mothers care about their children. And my life has been an example of the opposite. And in some ways, it was good for me to find those definitions and say, wow, that's what she was, a narcissistic mother. And it offers explanation rather than blaming myself. For my inability to connect with her, it's given me understanding that there was probably never any way that I'd ever connect with her, unless I could give her something, and then she would basically connect with me if she could achieve something out of me, like she did with my older brothers and sisters. She had relationships with them, but they gave her financial support, they gave her housekeeping support. So naturally she could turn on the charm when she wanted it. But
They had a different relationship with her, didn't they?
yes, yeah.
And
But she relied on them. So, but also I do believe, they were the oldest too, and I guess life was a lot less stressful when just they were there. And then as the rest of us children came along, obviously life got a bit more stressful, especially when my father got sick. The pressure would have been right on. So, and they had that time and those memories of getting on with my mother. But as I say, I still believe that she wouldn't have anything to do with them unless she could get something out of them. And she basically relied on my brother to financially input money into her property to maintain where she lived. And then when she got ill, my sister basically lived with her 24 hours a day. Yeah, she was very good at getting people to do things for her.
That's one of the characteristics, everybody. So I hope you're getting the impression, everybody. This is a very emotional book. The poems are all very well written, and the underlying story is very touching. Now, I think I understand this one because this is where the phrase the black sheep of the family comes from. You've got a section here, David, in the book about black sheeping. So talk to me about this black sheeping and its characteristics that you mentioned under the definition of the black sheeping and, the scapegoating, the negative labeling. That you were the black sheep. You were black sheeped, weren't you?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Mm.
But I think when you have a dysfunctional family, um, then to sort of quite often they will black sheep one of the members um, and ridicule them behind their backs, um, say that they're either crazy or whatever, and it makes the rest of the family feel normal because they place all their insecurities onto that one person. Oh, that's why we have issues in the family because of them. If they go, we get rid of them, it's a known fact, and that the definitions in the book are proper technical definitions of black sheeping. But yeah, it's sort of. I think I remember even hearing stories about villages years ago where there'd be issues, and then I guess it's a bit like the two, not to diverge too far away from the story, but even like let's take the Jewish communities throughout history in England and in Europe have been blamed for things not being right. And there's stories of how they were put on a ship and taken out to the middle of the English Sea and dropped off and then drowned. Look at Hitler did. Same sort of thing. That happens in families where the family's not coping very well. There's lots of issues, arguments. So someone has to take the blame. And so that person is black sheeped, just like Jews have been black sheep throughout history. Everyone else was struggling financially. They look rich. Oh, they must be taking all the money. Right, get rid of them. David's happy. We're not happy. Oh, that woman must be filling him up with rubbish, Get him away from his girlfriend. I don't know. But it certainly is something that happens in dysfunctional families.
Yes,
Black.
it does. It does.
And it's very hurtful for the person that is black sheep, but after a while you actually realise that you're best to be away from it. And that was the advice we got when we went to see a family psychologist. We didn't recognise what was going on with my mother and my family until we went and sat with a psychologist and explained. And he said, look, they're toxic. He said, get as far away as you can from them and let them wither on the vine, basically. That was his message to us. Let them wither on the vine.
Really?
In other words, don't communicate with them. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Mm. Um, Now you've already mentioned about anxiety, and this is the next section in the book, everybody. Um, Here you're talking about anxiety disorders, and it's very emotional. You know, you say that you cried for hours and found the music of Leonard Cohen and Tracy Chapman healing and helpful. And anxiety has been a fundamental core throughout your entire life. And my understanding is that you've put this down to the root causes of this narcissistic situation within the family.
Yeah. I believe I was a sensitive child, what some people would deem a sensitive child, but I was also targeted, yeah. And I think that the anxiety becomes about because you're criticized so much as a child, you don't know what is, especially when the goalposts keep moving, you don't know what, and then you don't know what to do to. And I remember I was a very shy child. I hardly said a word. I remember even going on soccer trips in other people's cars, and the parents would say, "David, are you okay? You haven't said anything. You don't say anything." I think I was that traumatized that I just thought, well, I best say nothing because I could be criticized, I could be put down, you know. Um, and and when I went into once I left school and went to work, I was just in an anxious state most of the time. Didn't trust anyone, thought people would be thinking badly of me. And as time went on in my life, my working life, I would cope through times of lots of work, but when the work dropped off, I would become anxious because it was almost like when I had something to divert my attention, I was fine. But as soon as the pressure came off, it was then I'd start getting anxious and I'd end up having a mental breakdown. Yeah. Had several of those.
Sure. I mean, we have over here in the UK, there's it's not an advert, but it's a short TV little documentary about and there's a young boy in it, and he's got a very big satchel on his back, a rucksack. And he's walking around with this rucksack, and all the other kids aren't. And he's sitting in class with his rucksack on. He's having his lunch with everybody with his rucksack on. And the rucksack, this heavy rucksack, is really the symbolism that this is a child who is walking around with a lot more on his back, on his shoulders, due to his family background.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. And you see at the end that there is support for him. So this is what they're basically saying. This is a child who's carrying a lot of baggage, and you
Mm.
need to support them.
Mm. Mm.
And when you were
Yeah, that's why I sort of go for the nautical theme because I believe in childhood you literally are being built for the future
Mm.
as a like a boat. And if your parents aren't putting in the right features and the doing the hard work to make sure the boat's sound, then how's it ever going to sail properly? You know. Um, and it's childhood hugely important. There's been a bit of a period there where psychologists have tried to get away from psychoanalyzing childhoods because it just brings up a big can of worms. But that's where all the problems come from, the child.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
that's where the problems come from. They're not inherited. Our brains are literally just a sponge when we are born, and we have genes and we have traits, but if we learn everything, and children aren't born with anxiety or depression. Um, but anyway, that's I'm not an expert, but I've certainly got a lot out of. It's taken a long time to come to grips with what I went through and why I had those issues, and they were terribly debilitating issues. You know, it was a huge anchor on my life.
Have you found writing the book helpful?
I think so. I've felt a lot better in myself since I've finished the book. Yeah, I feel more complete. Um, yeah, I really feel as if I fully understand the situation now. Yeah.
And I understand that you've written this book after your mother's death.
Yeah.
I probably guessed that you couldn't write it beforehand.
No, no. Well, I never thought about writing a book. I never thought about writing a poem. As I say, I believe I was spiritually motivated and guided to write what I wrote. and write the poems. It just keep coming in waves. And it took like 2 weeks of waking up in the early hours of the morning and just with these ideas and just starting to write. Yeah. And which just poured out of me. Yeah. 2 to 3 weeks, it was all over. Yeah.
Thank goodness you did write them because they are very, very well written, everybody, and they're very poignant.
Look, it's a good record for me too, like
Mm.
it's all in there. I wouldn't change a thing. It's it's really the reason why I made it a book is so that people can see my story, but also maybe able to get something out of it for themselves.
I agree. I agree. Now, we're going to go to the very last section of the book, everybody. And here I find you, David, talking about suggestive daily practices
Yeah.
of how to cope, handle, deal with a person who is of a narcissistic nature. And you list 11 suggestions, So talk to me about this section of the book.
That's where I put in here about the daily practices, you mean?
Yep.
The 10, is that it? The 10 steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I've done, and that's what I recommend. Is that, you write down in any form a list of the harms you've caused your spouse and partner, write down like basically I think I've been through the 12-step program, and that's part of that program is about, looking at yourself. Like I'm not perfect. I may have had an imperfect childhood, but I'm certainly not a perfect person. And when you have these issues, you do cause harm to others. So the first steps are about recognizing your own faults and the harms you've caused other people, and that you need to go to people and do the best you can to apologize. And these are not new. These are not new steps. Other people also recommend these steps. I think there comes a time in your life you have to, as part of the healing, you have to actually realize that you have harmed and hurt people. And sometimes it's not always successful when you do apologize. Some people won't accept that apology. But as they say, you sweep your side of the street clean. It's up to the others to decide whether they want a relationship or not. You're not seeking a relationship. You're simply trying to sweep your side clean and say, hey, look, I was damaged. I said these things. I did these things. I apologize. But yeah, the one number 5 there, every morning I go to the beach with my dogs, and I love doing it every day. And I walk down the beach and I'll say the Lord's Prayer, because it's a very special prayer to me, because my father used to say that prayer with my sister and I, away from my mother, in secret. And he's taught me that for a reason, and that's because it's a very good prayer. And it talks about,
And if
good
I'm,
steps.
yeah, and if
Good steps.
I think you're referring to the Our Father, aren't you?
Yeah, our Father who art in heaven, yeah, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come,
Give us
thy
this
will be
day our
done.
daily bread. Yeah. And that I say that several times every morning before I have a swim. And then I strip right off. Luckily I'm on a beach, there's no one around. I can walk far enough so there's no one there. And I go totally naked and I just go into the waves, and I am saying the Lord's Prayer, and as I dive under, I go, wash away my sins. And I say that because I believe my heart and my soul were so badly scarred, I could not feel, could not be my true self. And I ask God to wash away those sins, I'm asking him to wash away my scar tissue so that I can be myself, my true self, because it's so scarred and so damaged from my childhood. And I believe every day a little bit comes off and I feel better. And I recommend that to other people because we do have an inner child and our childhood can be terribly damaging to our true self and to our essence. And we are spiritual beings, I believe, and we are connected to the spiritual world. It makes so much sense. And I've always said too that we have our instincts, we have our consciousness. Most people just act on their instincts. Intelligent people add in consciousness and thought and contemplate, but also there's spirituality. And if you wind those two together or bind those three together, the instincts, the consciousness, and spirituality, I think you've got a really a strong rope to build anything out of or pull
So
yourself out of it.
yeah, I mean, so I think now people you start to realize, how important water is to David. I mean, he
Yeah.
does live by the sea, everybody, so he doesn't have to walk too far. Um, and how, the nautical link in the books, because when you look at the book, there are pictures of these fabulous ships. Um, And then you can see why he's the main, members of the family he's given these names to, and why he's referencing the ships, the sea, and why there's some spirituality in the book as well. This is what it's about. It's all of those subject matters, and it's done through the six poems and the areas that he's talking about, uh, the background around dealing with people who have a narcissistic characteristics within them and how to cope in life and probably accept it and perhaps not accept it at times. But that's what the book is about. So I simply say is go and read it. It's real eye-opening. I had to read it a couple of times so that to understand what it was about, and then I finally got the message. You might have to do that, everybody. So, David, do you tend to write any more books, or is it just the one? And who do you want to see reading your book?
Um, I, s- yeah, I'd like to write another book, but I don't have any inspiration to at the moment. I did have inspiration once I'd done this one, but I haven't got it so much at the moment. I sort of see this book, as I say, as a collage of, it's a bit like it's an artwork to me. Um, there's many facets to it, and it's not like your normal story where you can sort of read from the first page to the last and get a story. This is sort of a collection of the poems, as you know, the foreword, the afterword, and the pieces at the end about narcissistic mother and what steps I take. So yeah, it's taken all my everything that I believe in is in that book. So I'm not really inspired to write another one at the moment, but I may be. Um, I did say to my family, because they have read the book, and one in particular said he was the worst book he'd ever written, or ever read, sorry.
Mhm.
But and I said, well, maybe my next book will be about your reactions to the book, my family's reactions to the book. And since I said that, none of them have said anything, so they don't want to be in the next book. So,
Hmm. Families, eh? Families. Yeah. I've always said, and a lot of people say, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. They come with you.
but no, I feel that the book has helped to heal me. I was on a journey to healing before I wrote the book, before my mother died, and this has just been the icing on the cake as far as me healing myself. And yeah, and I don't have any bad feelings against my family. I understand that, um, a lot of it is just automatic reactions. And I'm sure my mother when she brought us up. It's her automatic reactions that were so damaging. She didn't consciously think, I'm going to be nasty today, but I think it just came out. This emotional damage just comes out, and when people are put under stress, basically. Yeah.
Where can people get your book from, David?
I believe that you can get it online in many places, on Amazon, on Balboa Books. But yeah, I've looked online, and there's many outlets online, in Italy, in Europe, and in America, all over the place, in New Zealand, Australia. There's many places you can buy it. Yeah.
There you go, everyone. So I just simply want to say to David Rice, thank you so much for coming on my show and talking to me about his book, Sailing Away. Um, Go and have a look at the other three poems, everybody. They're just as emotional and just as poignant and just as relevant. And I know poignant and relevant is the same meaning, but I was just emphasizing it. And but more importantly, it's the second part of the book, the background as to why really the book, and the poems that came about. And, facing up to that, some people and maybe some people in a family do have narcissistic traits and perhaps don't realize it. They just think it's daily life when it's not. Um, so, but it's a book you might have to read once or twice to fully understand its story, what it's getting at. But enjoy the poems, everybody, because I do. So I just simply want to say to David Rice from Australia, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, John. Pleasure.
I'm JT Crowley. Thank you for listening, watching, wherever you're in the world. Until next time, stay safe.